to the Marshals Museum. I'm Dave Kennedy. I'm the Curator of Collections and Exhibits here. Some of you joined us last week for a view inside collections and looking at some of the stuff we do there. Today we are going to be talking about the Hall of Honor. The Hall of Honor, let me check one thing real quick here just to make sure. Trying to use our little mobile stand and everything. So anyway, the Hall of Honor, dedicated to Samuel M. Sicard, is a very special place within the Marshals Museum, and in some ways, this is the reason why we are located in Fort Smith. The stories that we have, many of them are from people who were deputies here in Fort Smith, and these deputies ended up going off into Indian Territory, what's now Oklahoma, and they would lose their lives while trying to support their mission as deputies and posse members and others. But the deaths that are listed here are not just here in Fort Smith, they're not just here in what's now Oklahoma, although that's a big chunk. There's a reason why Stacy Hilton, the former director of the Marshals Service, describes this location as sacred ground. It's a very special place for all of us. It helps us to better remember the struggles and the ultimate cost sometimes that's paid by people who are serving the mission of the Marshals. Essentially, the main mission being to support the Constitution and the rule of law. The Marshals may not always want to do the job that they have to do, but they also know that they put on the badge, they do the job. Something you might remember me from saying last week. Deputy Al Butler is known as saying that during his time wearing the badge in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the cart and we're going to start moving on into the Hall of Honor so you get a chance to see what we have here. I know that some of you have seen it. Some of you were here for a dedication in October of last year, but for a number of folks, this will be their first time. So I'm really happy to get a chance to show you this. And as we come around, there's a view of the Arkansas River. That's Oklahoma over across to the right. That's the bridge, Garrison Bridge. And then we come around into the proper Hall of Honor. And I'll give you a quick shot and a pan here. But I'm going to focus on a couple of different things just to kind of let you know a little bit more about what we have. And as we look at it, I'm going to grab my notes and a couple of things here. The space that we have, the wall behind me, those are the names of 376 men and women who have died in the line of duty to the Marshal Service. The men and women who died in the line of duty, they are from all walks of life. They are throughout the history of our country. The first one is Robert Forsyth. He was U.S. Marshal for the District of Georgia, the very first one appointed by George Washington to that district. He died in 1794. The most recent one being a man named Jacob Keltner. He was a sheriff's deputy in Illinois. He died as part of a task force that was out after a particularly dangerous fugitive. He ended up getting killed in the line of duty as a task force officer. And that's one of the things I think I mentioned previously, that we are really proud of the fact that we can recognize those task force officers. I'll go into a little bit more detail in a bit as to why that's an important distinction. But I shouldn't go on any further without first thanking the people who have made this space possible. Number one being the Sam T. Sicard, the current president of First National Bank of Fort Smith. He helped to raise the funds in memory of his father, Samuel M. Sicard, who also in his time was the president of First National Bank of Fort Smith. Those very kind donors are the ones who allow us to be able to tell stories like this in this space. The other people that we have to thank, the work of decades, literally, goes back to, from the Marshal Service side, Frederick Calhoun, Marshal Service historian, and then David Turk, who followed him as a historian for the Marshal Service. They are quite possibly, they are the two sources for information on the Marshal Service. If you are ever in the need of a book, I meant to share these last week while I was in the collections area. The Lawman is the history that Frederick Calhoun wrote up through the bicentennial of the Marshals Service in 1989. Very good book. You can get this used in a lot of places, but it's still available through a lot of different collectors. And then Forging the Star, the book written just came out over the last couple of years from Dave Turk. He's the current Marshals Service historian. Dave's a great guy, great source of knowledge, and really good history, especially whereas Calhoun's history looks up through 1989. Dave Turk's history starts well before 1989, but really gives you the best information on the last 40 or 50 years of the Marshals Service, if that's what you're looking for. But two great sources of information, very good histories, both of them. The other people we need to thank are two researchers who, without them, this wall wouldn't be what it is. Bob Ernst was a researcher for many decades, at least 30 years, on law enforcement in general, line of duty deaths in the specific, and also Marshals Service. And the work that Bob did uncovered a lot of names and a lot of research that was previously unknown. So a lot of the names that are on this wall, nearly 100 names, are a direct result of the work of Bob Ernst. Some other work was done both supporting Bob Ernst and independently by a gentleman named George Stumpf. George is well known within the Marshals community. He's a retired Deputy U.S. Marshal from the District of Wyoming. He worked a very long career, did pretty much any job that you can think of that you could do within the Marshals Service. He's an outstanding badge collector and just resource fond of knowledge. He's really, between Bob and George, a lot of what's here couldn't have been done. And so we're really happy to be able to celebrate these names and recognize these individuals for the work that was done well before we started this project. And so with that, I'm going to continue on to talk a little bit more about what is here behind you. So the wall behind me, 376 names. 122 of those names are people who died across this river in what's now Oklahoma. About half of that number were directed out of the Marshal's office here out of the Western District of Arkansas, the court that was originally in Van Buren, eventually here in Fort Smith. And Fort Smith is really where those deputies started to really earn what a lot of us see as the current reputation. That would be Parker's Court, that would be the Marshals that we are familiar with from stories like True Grit, even though I talked last week about how True Grit's a fictionalized story, is based on a lot of fact. We also have other stories, a lot of the Western America, a lot of our current understanding of the West is based out of what was done here in Fort Smith, especially from the 1870s through the 1890s. Again, during the time of Isaac Parker's Court. The names up here, as I said, they run from 1794 up till now. They're going to keep running into the future, both from the obvious reasons of chasing after fugitives, being killed in the line of duty, handling prisoners. There's men up here who were just moving prisoners back and forth within a courthouse and were assaulted and killed. There have been people here who simply were in the wrong place at the wrong time, had a bad accident while trying to do the job of a marshal. But we also have some names up here. 3 names up here are people who died in the line of duty as a result of cancers developed from 9/11. And that's one of the reasons why off to my left, you'll see there is a piece of steel, a piece of I-beam up on that little podium. That is a piece of steel from the World Trade Center. That's one of 2 pieces we have in our collection, and as far as I know, we're the only people here in this part of Arkansas who have steel from the Trade Center, and it's a real special thing to be able to share that with other people, especially knowing that myself, as the curator, one of my jobs is to make sure that people don't touch the stuff that we have in the collection. However, I can take things like that, and that's these 2 pieces are 2 pieces I feel people need to touch. There's a lot of people who have a really special feeling, and it's a real special sense of concern whenever they get a chance to physically touch objects like that. And quite honestly, and I know some people who might disagree with me with this, there's not a lot of damage that they can do with the steel that's in there, and it helps make that history more real, and it helps make those stories more real. So we do recognize those 3 deputies. We also recognize that in the future, many more deputies are probably going to be succumbing to cancers as a result of that. So even though earlier this week we looked at April 15th as the deadliest day in Marshal Service history, with the tragedy at Going Snake, April 15th, 1872, over near what's now Christie, Oklahoma. If you want to, you can take a look at the video that we have that is on our YouTube account. I think Casey's going to share that here in a second, about the Going Snake tragedy. 8 of the names here on the wall are a direct result of that. Deputy U.S. Marshal Jacob Owens, a gentleman named William Hicks, Jim Ward, and Riley Woods. They're all regular deputies as part of their service, but then there were also several members of the Cherokee tribe who were there in an attempt to make sure that they got what they saw as justice regarding a family member of theirs, William Beck, Blacksut Beck, and Sam Beck, and then George Selvage. George Selvage was not really, he was not Cherokee, he was a U.S. citizen, but he was married into the Cherokee tribe. He married a Beck family member, so by those rules, he was accepted by the Cherokee tribe as a member. They are not, these 3, well, I'll continue on Going Snake. These 8 deaths until now were the deadliest day in the history of the Marshal Service, or the deadliest event. 9/11 Sunday, my personal guess is that it will surpass Going Snake. We are also unofficially looking at it that the current coronavirus pandemic is affecting the Marshal Service, and especially the court security officers who are part of that work. We haven't heard any official news, but we fully expect, we know that there are people who are doing those jobs who have coronavirus, and so we are expecting at some point to hear about names like that. So it's some different numbers that we're looking at that we have to also look at regarding this law. Let me get some other stories here. I mentioned a few members of the Going Snake incident, that particular that deputy's posse that went there, who were all Cherokee tribal members. They are not the only tribal members on this wall. In addition to the Becks, from the Cherokee Nation, we also have Henry Miller, Jim Nakedhead, Sam Six-Killer, obviously one of the more famous Cherokee deputies, Charles Warner, and Isaac Rogers, who's a Cherokee freeman. And so these names are all pretty special just in the fact that they were both working within the Cherokee tribe as well as supporting the Marshals. We also have a member of the Chickasaw Nation, James Guy, 2 members of the Choctaw Nation, William Fields and Charles Wilson, a member of the Creek Nation, David Sizemore, Kickapoo Nation, Steve Pensineau, and also even from Arizona, from Yuma Nation, a man named Charlie Escalante. So there are people from all across the country and a number of different Indian nations who are listed up on that wall. There's also a possible one. I need to at some point contact Ottawa Nation, a man named Asa Lincoln Kenny, who we believe may be a tribal member, but his name is up here on the wall as it is. So there's a number of different stories along these lines. And I see that there's some questions coming up. Somebody wanting to be a U.S. Marshal, they wish they were a little bit younger. It's a young man's game. I know myself, I'm too old to do it. I've had a chance to see some of the kids who, and I think of them as kids just because how young they seem, who are currently trained to be deputies. They are really some amazing people. Let me go ahead and I'll get a little bit closer up here, but before I talk more about the wall, I want to talk about what we also have over in this area. We have, besides those 2 kiosks that are right here, we also have a case here in the middle. I'm sorry about the glare from the lights. What these cases allow, let me make sure this is in frame. Yes. What these cases allow is every single one of the names that's up on the wall. We have our stories here on on these in a full database with all of the information. And in many cases, we'll have a short version of the story. We'll be able to tap into a long version of the story that I might be able to get the camera here by hand a little bit later. And if possible, we'll have photographs and other images related to people who are listed on the wall. We also have a case here that is going to continue to display different stories relating to people whose names are on the wall. In this case, we have U.S. Marshal Kenneth Muir, Deputy U.S. Marshal Robert Cheshire. In 1983, they went to apprehend a known fugitive in North Dakota. That fugitive and his son chose that they were going to, use the cliche, they weren't going to be taken easily. And they fired back, ended up taking the lives of the Deputy U.S. Marshal, wounding another deputy and others who were there in law enforcement capacity. The son is now currently serving time still in the federal prison. The father ended up going on the run and was continued to be a fugitive, was found several months later, at which point there was a standoff, and he, as well as local law enforcement, ended up dying in that standoff. There's longer stories, I'm sure you can find more of it, but we're going to continue to help tell some of these stories using the objects that were related to them. Last week I showed you, and if you go back, if you didn't get a chance to see it, if you look at our other Facebook Live and catch the stories that I was talking about from collections, I showed the badge and the credentials wallet for these two gentlemen. And so that helps tell some of these stories, and we're going to continue to share these stories. Let me take a look. Clarence is on talking about Riverfront Cogburn. We still, to this day, even though True Grit is a fictional story, we still get people showing up every so often claiming that they're a direct descendant of Riverfront Cogburn, or they want to find out more about Riverfront Cogburn's history as a deputy. We have to let them down easily and explain to them that Riverfront Cogburn was never a real person. So, but anyways, we'll continue to go on with what we have over here, and I will try and tell a few more stories. And maybe get a little bit closer to the steel at some point. So as we're looking, let me adjust my camera here. So as we are looking at the wall, again, these are 376 names. I'm going to try and pick out a few different ones for some stories. As I had mentioned, how far to the left am I? I think that'll do it. A couple to point out, Robert Forsyth, Augusta, Georgia, January 11th, 1794, U.S. Marshal for the District of Georgia, killed while on duty, serving a notice to appear. Jake Keltner, Rockford, Illinois, March 7th, 2019, that was last year. We have the most recent name on there. If you want to be specific and look at the most recent name for a Deputy U.S. Marshal, that would be Norman Burkle, Deputy U.S. Marshal. He died of a heart attack in Corpus Christi, Texas, January, just a couple months before we lost Calvin. We have one woman on the wall currently, Madeline Hayworth. We talked about her on our Facebook page about not quite a month ago. Madeline Hayworth was in Miami-Dade Police Department. She was on a Marshal Service task force that was going after fugitive. She and her partner, Roger Castillo, also right there. Roger Castillo was her partner. They were both Miami-Dade Police Department. They were both on that task force. They went after the fugitive. They were both shot and killed. The fugitive was later shot and killed in exchange gunfire. There's some really sad stories, but people who are really willing to give their all for the job that they have to do. If you come here in person, one of the things that you'll notice, and I will bring this up and get a couple of close examples if I can. There are names that you'll see. Make sure that I can get on James Kirby here real well. All right, so James Kirby. That is, yeah, you can just make out the star, the single star that's right there. James Kirby has one. W.D. Hildreth right there, he has one. And those particular stars, the single stars, what they represent is these individuals are individuals who have they're not recognized yet by the Marshal Service, but through the result, I mentioned a couple of guys earlier, specifically Robert Ernst, through his research as well as that of some others, about 100 of the names here on this wall were all uncovered and submitted to the Marshal Service. And those records, the Marshal Service is slowly processing through those as the best they can. And as they approve those, they're going to be added permanently to the wall in headquarters in Crystal City, Virginia. Until that point, they're all kind of considered tentative. And so we'll continue to have these plates here with the star, just kind of marking them that they're not official yet, but we're really positive that these are legitimate line of duty deaths. And so we can recognize them here, even though the Marshal Service, by rights, does have to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more stringent with what they allow by their definitions. There are also a number of names up here that have 2 asterisks, and there's not an easy one to try to get hold of right now. But I mentioned Amanda Lynn Hayworth and Roger Castillo. They have 2 stars after their names. And what that identifies them as is a task force officer. The task force officers are city, county, state, and other federal agencies. They all work together with the Marshal Service in order to serve papers, serve warrants, notices to appear, just subpoenas, all kinds of different things. If they feel like it's going to be something that's going to be dangerous, or something outside of the regular jurisdiction that this paper has to be served, they can go ahead and use the Marshal Service and their task forces to do this. By way of doing this, a lot of city, county, state, and other federal agencies are able to greatly magnify their abilities by using the Marshal Service to give them some extra authority to get their jobs done. And in doing so, these places, like everybody ends up being a little bit safer, but we also get a lot more done. And the Marshal Service, as a result of this, is able to arrest more fugitives than any of the other federal agencies. So it's really neat. It's just a really neat multiplier when you start looking at how effective all of these different organizations can become by doing this. And I see there's a couple of questions. There we go. Okay. So, other than that, there's a couple of stories I want to mention. There are 4 names up here directly related to Billy the Kid. A lot of people don't know Billy the Kid, William Bonney, was for about a week and a half a deputy. That happened until he started taking things a little bit into his own hands and a little bit outside of what he's supposed to do. But then as a result of that, he ends up being on the bad side of the law, and he starts to get chased by a bunch of other people who are all a deputy or special deputies, like other people who have been deputized, or the posse members. And so he ends up in 1878, William Brady and George Hyndman end up getting killed. And then in 1881, James Bell and Bob Ollinger, they end up getting killed. And if anybody's seen Young Guns or any of the other movies about Billy the Kid, Bob Ollinger shows up at some point, and then but all these different shootouts, he ends up, 4 of the names on this wall are a result of Billy the Kid and his gang. Let's see another question. Okay, there's a question about a U.S. Marshal. I don't have that information on my hand. The question about somebody claims to have applied to the U.S. Marshal for something. We usually don't have records on that. If somebody served as a marshal or a deputy marshal, we might have the records. The U.S. Marshals themselves, one for every district, appointed by the President, approved by Congress, there's a lot of really good records on those. The deputies themselves, right now there's 3,500 deputies. And over time, there's been tens of thousands, well, hundreds of thousands of people who have been deputy U.S. Marshals in the history of our nation. And those people, we would not be able to expect to have records on all of them. And so we try to find out what we can. I can take a look, Clarence, and find out if there's anything else that I can grab off of that. So let's take a look. Other names that are in here. I mentioned 9/11, and I'll get you a little bit closer. Let's take you over here closer to the steel. This is such a nice view. The steel from the World Trade Center, like I said, this is one of those special pieces. I like people being able to touch, and you see some really strong reactions by some people. Zacharias Toro, Kenneth Doyle, and Von Troy Aiken. They all lost their lives as a result of cancers developed by 9/11. Von Troy Aiken also stands out as the only person who was an administrative employee of the Marshal Service who is on the wall. Everybody else is up there in some way or shape as a law enforcement officer. Other stories that we have up here. One of my favorites, and a lot of people don't realize this, they might know the Posse Comitatus Act. Let's see, where is he at? There he is. I want to get this right here. Let's see if I can get, yeah, it should be there. Yeah. Emmanuel Robinson Crusoe. A long time ago in the U.S., we had this called the Posse Comitatus Act. It still applies today. That it was established in the late 1800s in order to prevent the marshals from using active duty uniformed military to help them do their job. Essentially said, that's kind of what led to what is used today. There's a lot of times when something happens, people want the military to come in. Just like what happened when integration occurred in Little Rock, Arkansas, back in the 50s. But the reason why you can't just bring in the military on things is because of the Posse Comitatus Act. In most ways, the only way you can bring the military in to keep social order or to enact some particular rule or law is when local law enforcement or local government is not able to or is not willing to be able to come in and take out some different, to enact those particular rules. So Emmanuel Crusoe, one of the things I really like about him is this is before the Posse Comitatus Act came in. And with his particular story, he was a soldier in Kentucky. The local marshal's office needed a squad to go with them to, this is during Reconstruction, they went to take out a Klan meeting, and he shows up, gunfight breaks out, and he ends up getting killed. But the thing that always sticks out to me, partially because he was just this poor kid who was in uniform and ended up going out and dying in the line of duty for the marshals, but just the nickname Robinson. So Emmanuel Crusoe, Robinson Crusoe, and even in some of the paperwork, some of the newspapers at the time, he shows up as Robinson Crusoe, the same person from the famous book. So that's one of those neat things. Let's see here. And Bob Ernst, our researcher, former researcher, said that the story about Frank Canton and B. Dunn is in his files. Okay, so that would be an easy place to look for it. I just didn't know if it was in there or not. That's one of those things that we always can go through and take a look at. Glad to see that Bob's here. But there's a lot of different stories that are up in here. There's a lot of different things that we could tell. I had mentioned that we were hoping to do this for about 30 minutes. It's been about 30 minutes. I was hoping for some more questions, Q&A like what we had last time. I haven't seen quite so many questions come across. And if there are no other questions, though, I am probably going to go ahead and call this day good. Thank you all for coming in and getting a chance. Let's see what's there. Has Chase White been added? Chase White is on the wall. Chase White, I have that. Okay, cool. You worked with him in Tucson. Chase White, I had a chance to write the biography here on Chase White. He really was an impressive individual. Chase White, let me come down here and find his. I am going to go ahead and grab my phone. This whole time I've had this on a mount that we're using. Chase White is right there. And he really was something else based on everything that I have seen and read. And this is going to be, there we go. Let's see if I can do this without breaking my phone. There we are. Chase White is really, it was just a really interesting story as to all the stuff that he did. And yeah, I understand the audio is better the closer you am to the computer. It's just, unfortunately, with the space here, we have a chance to talk about a lot of different stuff here. As for the role of special deputy as opposed to reserve deputy, I'm not 100% sure on the story regarding when they chose special deputy regarding reserve deputy. I know that for the Marshal Service, for the stuff that I've seen, I can't recall very often seeing the term reserve deputy. I know that for task force officers, are regularly referred to as special deputies. As we've gone back in the past, most of the 20th century, if somebody was deputized for a particular purpose, they were referred to as a special deputy. Even going back into the 1800s, I've seen some where people were deputized for example, for protecting elections in the South during Reconstruction. They were referred to as special deputies on the paperwork. But most times, and just I can't recall seeing reserve deputy standing out on anything. So let's see here. But yeah, I'm not sure why they chose the difference between the two of them. I'm not really familiar with anybody being called reserve deputy outside of a lot of county sheriff's departments. But with that, unless somebody else has a quick request, I am going to go ahead and I will call this one a day. And thank you very much for showing up and watching part of this and participating in this Q&A session. And I'm glad I had a chance to show you the Hall of Honor and be able to talk about our wall that we have here, especially the names that we are able to show here that just due to our special relationship that we have with the Marshal Service. Thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great day.